Hi there, thanks for tuning in to my first impressions video about the Pimax Crystal and the Pimax Portal. My name is Andy. I've been to the first destination of the Pimax Roadshow event in Berlin on the 18th of November. And I want to give you a quick first impressions overview about the devices. It will really be just a first impressions video. Don't expect a full review. This was not the kind of event. I will go to that later in detail. It will be highly subjective. I try to make some objective points, which I think won't change until the final device. And yeah, let's start with the event itself, because I can make some disclaimers that will put my impressions into perspective. The point of the event was getting first user experiences, and where it deviated a little bit from my expectation was that I was expecting a beta state of the devices, or at least an alpha state. What I mean by that is that they work in a somehow controlled environment as they would if they ship out to me. This was unfortunately not the case. Let me show a picture real quick. So you see there one of the stations which had the Pimax Crystal set up and a HOTAS and some gamepads. And the thing was, only one of the 4 stations had the VR controllers, which you use to move your hands around. And so this was already a problem in that we had to hop around the stations to try out different things. So I was expecting to get to a station, make the headset comfortable and have it half an hour or 1 hour completely for myself. This was not the case. So you had to, you wanted to be social, you give another participant the device to look through it, and you won't spend too much time about getting everything right and adjusting the fit and all. So this is already something which should tell you that not everything I say can be 100% correct. On top of it being subjective, people experience different things. I've talked also with other participants, and we perceived different specifications, different visual aspects differently. So another disclaimer that I want to make is that the Pimax Crystal didn't have the right power cable, or the right cable. It had an 8KX cable which wasn't giving it sufficient power delivery, which meant that the Pimax Crystal was powered by the cable and also by the battery pack on the back, which resulted in multiple crashes and a lot of instability. So this is also something that could completely turn out different in the next roadshow events when they have a good cable. I suppose that many bugs come from that. I hope at least. But yeah, it resulted in the headsets being unstable overall. And I can just speak for the 1 hour I was there. Talking with them, it seemed like they had less problems before. But it was really like during that 1 hour we were hopping between the headsets, like a headset worked for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and then it crashed somehow. So this is also something that lessened the way in which you could really experience the device, because you were just happy to have it working with the visuals without SteamVR crashing, and this also resulted in you don't wanting to switch too much between the VR apps. Now, I also met Sweeviver, Martin is his name, and Joshua, and also some employees from China. And overall, they were very kind. They answered any questions I had. They took the time, and overall, although it was a little bit chaotic, they were really trying their best to give me the best impression I can have. So it was not like they tried to hide something or said, oh, only look at this. I could, in the environment, I had to do anything that I wanted to. But the stability limited my personal decision making. So when a VR app was working, I was using that VR app. But there were different VR apps. There was Flight Simulator, there was Assetto Corsa, and also Hellsplit Arena. So I could get the basic experiences. I could also try YouTube videos to simply perceive how the visual quality looks on a video. And yeah, overall, it was sufficient enough to evaluate the visual experience. Now, that being said, let's get to the devices themselves. I start with the Pimax Portal because this will be very quick. I couldn't really evaluate the qualities of the Pimax Portal because it only had a 3D picture of the VR app Brink XR. You probably have seen it. They've shown it in a through the lens video of a Pimax Crystal with that Rocky Mountains horseshoe formation. But it wasn't really the real Brink XR app. It was just a 3D picture, and this picture had the wrong depth, and it was also bad quality pixel-wise. So you couldn't really evaluate anything about the visuals, if I can say so frankly. Because I can't say, was it the bad 3D picture or is it actually the panel looking bad? Also, the controllers didn't work, so I couldn't really evaluate the 6DoF tracking. Like the 6DoF of the Portal tablet was working basically, but because the 3D picture had the wrong depth, I couldn't tell, okay, is this now warping, or is the tracking bad or stuttering? It's simply, it's not even an alpha state, I would say, because this is not a VR use case. This is like putting a normal tablet into a third-party 3D VR case, turning up Google Cardboard and say, okay, try this out. So I wasn't really sure what kind of impression they expected from a user there. And so all I can say is 6DoF is technically working, and this is said very generous. And I'm not sure this is even dangerous for the Quest 2. Like, from my first impressions, there was not a single aspect where I would say that this could be a better VR device than the Quest 2. So I think you should more see it as a VR tablet. Maybe it's more marketed for the Asian market, where mobile gaming is more popular, and having the VR aspect as an afterthought. But yeah, it didn't really convince me. Like, there are milestones they have to tackle, and as long as they're not tackling it, it's just a concept. And it doesn't make me optimistic for what they can achieve, because the big things like tracking and the distortion profiles and all of that, these are the things that make it usable or not. And at this stage, they weren't done. They weren't even started. I couldn't evaluate it. That's all I can say. I don't know how long this takes. I don't want to give time frames, like saying, oh, they could do this in 3 months, or oh, they won't even achieve it in 1 year. Who knows? But yeah, simply wait for these devices actually showing something that they should do. Now let's get to the device you're actually watching this video for, the Pimax Crystal. I will go in an order which resembles the way I experienced it at that time at the event. Let me start first with the comfort. Let's look at that picture. It looks humongous there, but it didn't look or feel actually that big in real life. It's bigger, of course, than other headsets, and they use the same housing as we do with the 12K due to them trying to reduce the costs. But the comfort was fine, I would say. The face gasket felt nice, it was soft, it was nice to the touch. The headband had the adjustments any headset should have, at least in my opinion. No matter how much it weighs and no matter how the weight is distributed. Also, the battery pack in the back helped a little bit with that. But yeah, you can always improve that. But out of the box, it was an alright comfort. I did only use it for a couple of minutes all the time, so this could be a different picture if I would use it for 1 or 2 hours. But yeah, let's get this out of the way. And doing the island hopping with the different devices due to only one having the controllers and the different VR apps, I had to adjust the IPD every time. But this was also really quick due to the IPD adjustment on the fly with the volume rocker on the top left. And usually I have an IPD of about 64 to 65 degree millimeters. And there I had to use an IPD of 60 to 61. And this was due to me trying to get the same object in focus with my left and my right eye. And at these settings I had this picture. Now, of course, if I would use this device privately, I would take more time with the IPD adjustment, and this has a big impact on things like the sweet spot of the distortions and stuff like that. So it was probably not the most perfect setting that I could have achieved, but it was decent enough. And next thing I noticed were the distortions coming from the Quest 2. Now, this is due to the lens design. Fortunately, I can't put it into perspective if it's better or worse than what the Vario Aero offers. They did have it there, but it wasn't set up yet. But I would say it's one of those things that you can get used to. And also it's one of those things that are dependent on the use case. So if you have an environment like Flight Simulator or Assetto Corsa, where you don't have that many different layers of distances, you more have one near field distance and one far field distance, then it's not that apparent compared to a game like Hellsplit Arena, where you're actually walking around in the environment and you have many objects at almost all the distances you can have. It's more apparent there. And it did bother me at first, but this is something that I can only tell if I actually get used to this device. But this is not something, even though I notice it and it bothered me at first, this is not one of the reasons that would make me not purchase this device. You have to find it out by yourself. You have to know how sensible you are to this kind of artifact. But the Pico 4 has it not as good as the Quest 2, but better, and the Quest 2 has less distortions than this device as a comparison. Then next, VFOV. I would say this picture almost resembles how the FOV looked proportion-wise. The vertical FOV wasn't as narrow as I expected, because the displays were somehow similar to the Vario Aero, so I was asking myself, will it be as narrow or will it be noticeably narrower than the Quest 2? All I can say to that is that it didn't bother me. It didn't feel like some ultra wide display or something like that. Horizontally, the FOV, I would say, was about the same area as the Quest 2. So this is not a Pimax FOV. This is more standard FOV, maybe a little bit bigger than what the Vario Aero offers, but more vertically. They also have, I think, actually more pixels vertically, so there is a reason why the Pimax Crystal shouldn't be as narrow as the Vario Aero. But I can't tell you if it's 5 degrees less vertically or 10 degrees less vertically as the Quest 2. All I can say is that it didn't bother me personally. But I'm not using a Pimax headset. I'm also not using a Valve Index. So I'm probably one of those guys that are also comfortable with a smaller FOV. But I did enjoy the FOV of a Pico 4. And it was noticeable for me. And yeah, there's another thing about the FOV. There's something you can't tell about the specifications of a device, only knowing the diagonal FOV and the horizontal FOV. even though these numbers are completely wrong anyway. But you can't calculate what vertically FOV you should have, and you also can't calculate what stereo overlap you would have. And for me personally, I found the stereo overlap a little bit lacking. If you blend out the degree numbers in this illustration, simply think that this picture is the whole FOV you see. And for me, the stereo overlap was only the yellow circle. So it wasn't like there was a slim border that wasn't overlapping. It was a noticeable chunk of a display that wasn't overlapping. And also here they are circles. The Pimax Crystal has rectangular displays, and it looked like you had a white stripe on the left and a white stripe on the right. A stripe on the right only be seen by the one eye. And this is something, if you want to know how good stereo overlap looks in comparison, you should try out the Pico 4, because first, it almost, in my opinion, has complete stereo overlap. Like, yeah, it has a little part that isn't overlapping, but it's almost, if I would have to throw a number, 95% or 98% stereo overlap. It's great. And it's also a big FOV, and it's also a round FOV, I would say. Like, I try to press these devices as close to my head as possible, even using my hands. And the Pico 4 has a big FOV and a round FOV and a high stereo overlap. This is something that it does way better, in my opinion, than the Pimax Crystal does. And this is one aspect that makes a sharp image and a clear image for me. It's not only about the pixel density. And yeah, I don't support this decision. I think they should have focused on a better stereo overlap. But I'm not sure if there are some physical limitations, like they couldn't move the headsets, the panels closer together. Yeah, it's simply something, again, you have to try out different devices and you have to decide how much it bothers you, how much an upside can outweigh a downside for you. The resolution. Yeah, that's a big point. It didn't bother me, and that is a big compliment, because with other headsets you always have a feeling like the resolution could be higher. I'm not saying that this is retina resolution and you can't see pixels anymore and the screen door effect is gone. I would say that the screen door effect is mostly not an issue anymore, but you still see some vertical pixel lines if you look at bright objects. But it's not really bothering, and it's not something you notice in most pictures. Like in this picture, you would probably notice it if there would be less clouds and the sky would be bright blue during the daylight. But yeah, this could probably be less of an issue with micro OLED because you have a different pixel arrangement. But yeah, this is not the issue. The SDE is not an issue. And the pixel density, you know, it's at that point, I think with different aspects of the visual quality, you reach a point where you say, okay, this is good enough, please improve other things. Like if you use a Pico 4, you could say the stereo overlap is good enough, the FOV is good enough, now improve on the resolution. The same is here the case. The resolution is good enough, now please improve on other aspects. Like, it's really good. And I only could try the 35 PPD lens on the first day. They told me that they are shipping from China per express the 42 PPD lens, and they wanted to have it on display on Sunday. But I didn't feel like this is really necessary for normal gaming. Like maybe this gives you an improved experience if you watch a video or if you play games on a virtual screen where you're not using the whole FOV, but you're just like with a movie, you're looking at a virtual screen that doesn't fill up your whole FOV, so you can give a little bit up on that. But yeah, I'm personally, I'm very satisfied with 45 ppd lens fidelity wise, and the 42 ppd, yeah, it wouldn't be that big of a selling point in my opinion. It would have been cool if they would have a higher ppd lens probably, even if it had more not ppd, sorry, a higher FOV lens with more distortions. Yeah. So another big point when I have talked about the local dimming. Yeah, it's working. It was working all the time. So better than the Vario Aero and better than the Quest Pro even, which to my understanding didn't use the local dimming all the time. And at first I was a little bit skeptical. Like I was asking, I was looking for the artifacts that you normally have with local dimming, because I'm using a MacBook Pro, and I could test HDR before that and local dimming, so I know what I had to look for. And the MacBook Pro has a great display, but although it's not an issue in my opinion, you can see the haloing in unfavorable scenarios, and I didn't see the haloing at first. And they even showed me then a video where you have a bright screen and a pitch black dark outside, and still the halo was not bothering me at all. Like I could see it a little bit, so it's not like it's unperceivable, but it's so good that it's not an issue at all. And it even makes you question, do I even need OLED? Because the darks, already say not black, the darks. It wasn't a bright black, it wasn't a gray where I say, oh, it's black because I know it's black. No, I looked outside of the virtual cinema. Here's the bright virtual cinema. I looked outside and it was that dark. It's that good of a black. And also during use, you could see the contrast. I think it would have been more apparent going side by side. But yeah, if somebody tells you that this headset has a noticeably greater resolution than other headsets and almost OLED colors, in my opinion, these are impressions that are not over exaggerating. Like you can always get better, but this is so good that I again would say, okay, these colors are so great, now please focus on other things. Yeah, but the industry will probably move to micro OLED and pancake anyway. But yeah, I think this combination of spheric lenses that pass through a lot of light, the brightness doesn't get diminished by a lot, and also this micro dimming display that can show these dark blacks and these great colors is a good combination. So even though something like distortions are more apparent, I think it would have been wrong to use a Fresnel lens with this kind of panel, or use some double stacked lenses like the Vive Pro 2 had. And if you would use a pancake lens with this panel, keep in mind that the pancake lens only lets 10 to 20% of the light through. So you would need a way more brighter display panel to achieve the same kind of brightness. So what you have here in brightness and contrast is very hard to beat. And I can imagine that even the Megane X with OLED but with pancake will have a hard time to achieve a similar picture. I'm not saying that it can't, but it's good. It's good. It's one of those upsides that can outweigh the downsides depending on which kind of user you are. Excuse me for stumbling a little bit, but yeah. What else? Okay, now I throw out simply small things that came up. USB-C audio works. It has a USB-C on the bottom for a microphone or your headset. There was a problem where some participants had an issue with focusing of faraway objects. So they said near objects were crystal clear and faraway objects were less clear. I didn't have this issue. I only had the issue of me being in the sweet spot. But when I was in the sweet spot, I could see far away objects also very clear. But yeah, what else? They also had one device where you could put off the lenses and you could see the protection lens, and it was also something where one headset had dust inside, but I think it was outside of a protection layer. So will this be an issue? It depends on the quality control, but at least in theory it's a cleanable design, so you don't have to worry that you will get dust in it when you swap the lenses, and you will never be able to clear it out ever again. Another thing. Oh, I didn't talk about the tracking yet. Again, this was something I have a hard time to evaluate because I'm not used to a distortion, so I can't say, is this now a distortion? I see why it wobbles, or is this due to the tracking? But I would say that the headset tracking was actually fine. I did have issues with the Pico 4 tracking, for example. Like, I noticed a stuttering with the Pico 4 tracking. Another user brought his own Pico 4 at that event, and I had the same perception as with my own Pico 4, which I returned already by now. And it didn't feel that bad with the Pimax Crystal, so I would say the tracking of the HMD is fine. But yeah, this is something you should wait for when the device is released and when more people could give different experiences. Yeah, it was a short impression. It was often crashing, so yeah, it was probably not the perfect state. It will be, or hopefully will be, when they ship the device. The controllers though, so there was only one set of controllers working, and this set was attached by the USB cables and cabled to the PC. So I'm not sure which kind of data passed through the cable, but yeah, the inside out was not in a working state yet. And also, at first, only the buttons of the hands were working, so I had the hands frozen like this in the air, and I could move the hands, but the 60OF wasn't working. They were fixed in place. Then later they fixed it somehow, and then you could move the hands, but they were crippling around, so it wasn't perfect either. And then the buttons were freezing, so now the hands were moving, but the grip wasn't working anymore. So yeah, they have to work a lot on the tracking. So this is not something that comes automatically with the XR2. I was of the impression that maybe Qualcomm gives a lot of the main work to the developers, and they only have to do slight adjustments due to them using a different device, but they actually have to put in a lot of work there. And yeah, it's simply not something where you can even compare it. Like, you can't say, is it as good as the Quest 2 or the G2? No, it's still in a pretty early development stage. So, anything else? No, let's wrap it up now. I think maybe if there's more interest, I can do Ask Me Anything or Q&A. Yeah, and Let me give a quick conclusion now. What is my opinion of Pimax Portal? Okay, the Pimax Portal, in my opinion, wait for it when they have it in an actually showable state. Should you pre-order it? In my opinion, you should pre-order the device if it's already working in a way it should be. Don't buy a promise. Even if it's way cheaper now if you pre-order it, yeah. I will not pre-order the Pimax Portal because I don't see how it can perform any better than the Quest 2. And don't go by the specs, go by how it would actually feel. And the same about the Pimax Crystal. Now, don't try to focus on how much I talked about different aspects. There are two things you can go about a VR device, in my opinion. No device is perfect. Every device has its downsides. The one way you can go about is that you have something that is important to you, and it makes so much of the immersion and the experience that you say, okay, this is such an upside, I deal with all the downsides it has. And personally, I'm not that kind of person. Like, I want to have more of an overall good all-rounder that does nothing really bad or so bad that it bothers me. And I was interested in the Pimax Crystal because money is not an issue. And I think the Pimax Crystal is worth its money. I think even if you leave out standalone and the Lighthouse module and the YGig module and the mixed reality module, if they simply would improve on the stability, if they get the tracking working, I think the picture quality will most likely be better than the Vario Aero, simply because local dimming works so good and it works all the time as far as I saw. And the resolution is good and the FOV didn't bother me. Stereo overlap wasn't perfect, but this is also an issue on the Vario Aero. Same with distortion. So you could say that the Pimax shares its problems with the Vario Aero, but it has some upsides to it. And it's also cheaper than the Vario Aero. So yeah, I think for somebody who is interested in the Vario Aero, that person should wait for the Pimax Crystal and also wait for how quick they are with the development. Like, I don't want to say cancel your pre-order or something like that, but things like the tracking also make a big part of experience and it's not figured out yet. But if they would improve the stability, I would say that it's usable for simulations already and you can have a great experience. And it's worth the money if you want to spend that much money. But yeah, I don't feel like it's the best all-rounder. Like, the resolution and the great picture quality contrast-wise can't outweigh for me some things like the stereo overlap, because it will... I know I'm the kind of user, I will use the headset and I will say, oh, this looks so great now. Oh, goddamn, now I'm out of the sweet spot. And now if I look here and there, I can see the lacking stereo overlap. Yeah, this is something you can't see from a spec sheet. You have to see what a kind of user you are. And if you have a possibility, you should always try to try different headsets. There are headsets that excel in different things. Like the Quest 2 for me is the headset that excels in room tracking. Valve Index probably is as good. Like, I had the Reverb G2 with the Valve Index knuckles, so at least for controllers I know how perfect tracking can look like. But with the Quest 2, when you move around the room, you feel like everything is correct. You don't feel like the area is distorting much, or that the distances or the depth is different. Also, you know how I talked about the Pimax Crystal having the same housing as the Pimax 12K? It also means that it has canted displays, which needs special reprojection profiles. Now, this doesn't have to be that big of a downside. Even the Valve Index has canted displays. It's just that it's always working and it doesn't have that big of an performance impact on a small FOV with a low resolution. But this is simply a design choice the Pimax Crystal wouldn't need to have, because it doesn't have that big of an FOV. It has a normal FOV, it has a fine FOV. But if they had chosen to use a design adjusted to the lenses and the panel, I think they could have gotten away without canted displays. It's simply something you have to keep in mind. I'm not a Pimax user. I think you can read more about how big of an issue this is from real Pimax users, and I didn't feel like it having an issue with my demos. But again, would you be able to tell if the stereo 3D is only 95% correct? Not so sure. You would notice it unconsciously maybe. So this is also something that simply changes the way how you perceive a device. Or the Pico 4, I already mentioned. If you want to know good FOV with good stereo overlap, try the Pico 4. And this is the device that nails pixel fidelity and colors. And yeah, I'm not so sure about the edge-to-edge clarity, because I mean, what is good edge-to-edge clarity without a good sweet spot? Like, as soon as you get out of a sweet spot, you get less edge-to-edge clarity. Yeah. So, yeah, this is my first impressions video. I hope you liked it. I hope I didn't stumble too much. And yeah, see you around.